Eve at War, Day 70. Thousands of starships have descended upon Delve. Their goal? To destroy the Imperium, specifically Goonswarn Federation. Every one of those ship commanders needs supplies, ships, modules, custom rigs, charges, scripts, implants, drugs. All that gear needs to be moved and stored in forward operating bases. Those bases need to be connected by bridges, and all of that needs fuel to function. That's the machinery of war. Who builds it, deploys it, maintains it? Well, that job belongs to logistical masters. Welcome to another episode. Welcome to another episode of Talking in Stations, the EVE Online Weekend Report. I'm Matterall. Today, we'll review the week's news and for both game and players. Later in the program, we take a look at Alliance logistics roles. Our guest is industrialist Dunk Dinkle. He's a member of the Brave Newbies and the sub-coalition of Voltron. We'll find out about that. Let's get started. On our panel today, TIS subject matter experts begin with Elise Randolph of Pandemic Legion.
Hey, good afternoon / good morning, everyone.
Elise covers null-sec, Alliance Tournament, and EVE history. Also, there's Arsia Elkin from Electus Matari.
Hello, how are you doing?
Hey, Arsia. She's also known as Baleful Dysnomia. You can find her streaming channel under that name. She covers Empire Space, invasions, role-playing, solo to small gang PvP. Artimus Albosa from Noir.
Howdy, howdy.
Artimus covers mercenary work, small gang, and pirating. Then, of course, there's McLeod from the Initiative. He is our engineer. How's it going, McLeod?
Hey, I'm doing good. Hope you guys out there are doing good.
Nice. And Dunk Dinkle from Brave.
Good morning, party people. Let's get this energy level high up here.
He's a logistics master from Brave and also part of a legacy coalition. He's going to talk all about logistics and what's involved there. Among other things, he's going to join us in all the topics that we hit. All right. So the first thing we want to hit this week is Depths of the Abyss came out this week. Someone want to explain what it is?
It makes the Abyss even more scarier than possible, and I'm terrified to go into any of them.
Yeah, so essentially they're iterating on the Abyss, which is like the little PvE zones that you can pop into for 20 minutes. Right now, there's a tier 1 through tier 5, starting like escalating in difficulty the higher number you go. They're introducing a tier 0 for like people who just want to go in there and not die instantly, just to kind of figure out what the mechanics are like and stuff like that. And for the more hardened players, they're also introducing a tier 6 site, which is ultra hard. The tier 5 sites are actually pretty difficult right now. But the tier 6 sites, if you've gone on to Sissy to try them out, they are exceedingly difficult. I ran through about a dozen of them and I died. I just completely decked out my ship and I still died 2 of the 12 times. So it is pretty difficult. But it is also very rewarding. We're talking like 500 millisc an hour in pure profit if you can get it right.
If you can do it.
They've also added a new way to do it, so you can do it in 2 destroyers. So the options are 1 cruiser of any kind that's not a Tech 3 ship, 2 destroyers of any kind, or 3 frigates of any kind. So those are your options now when you're entering the Abyss.
I'm interested to see if people are going to start running them with 2 Draugrs now that the Draugr got buffed. Because I know the double Nurgle plus Deacon was relatively popular for farming tier 5 Firestorms. I wonder if the people are going to do the duo Draugrs as well now. Anybody else done the higher level Abyss? I triple box Hawks in the Darks. Does anybody else do them?
I just run the Chaotix in a Sacrilege because the Sacrilege has a bunch of buttons that you can push, so it feels like you have agency over your fate instead of like a Hilo where it's just like passive tank or something.
Yeah,
right on.
Well, we did test these out. Fonsway is part of TIS. We did a stream on Monday or Tuesday when it was announced. Monday was a holiday. And we saw him take some stuff on, and yeah, it was tough. He said it's gonna be really tough. So people who are up to that challenge, Abyssal level 6, good luck.
You will need it.
Yeah. I like the level zeros. I think it's a good idea to allow something with like absolutely no pressure for people to say like, I'm terrified of this. I've heard about it, but if I can just feel it out, that would be good. So I think level 0 is a good idea.
I feel like the level 1s really didn't have any pressure because I did some of those for the event when they had skill points, and I just dual boxed 2 like retributions on it, and it was just a cakewalk in a level 1.
If you're dual boxing, you're already ahead of the game. I'm thinking like, yeah, if you even know to dual box, but yeah. So
are the capital multiplasmids dropping on the test server yet? Because that's a really significant change.
They are not yet, at least not as of yesterday, but that's where they apparently will be dropping from the tier 6s. So we'll be able to abyssal capital mods now, which is going to make every faction Titan owner way more poor.
I mean, it's also going to make Titan pilots a little bit more concerned as well, because one of the modules that have the capacity to be rolled now is siege modules.
Right.
I believe.
I think I saw siege modules on there, which would be interesting because, well, I mean, what are some of the use cases for siege modules that are amplified in some way?
So the siege modules, they dramatically increase the dread's damage and its tank. So any situation in which you have an active tank dread or a dread where you want to eke out the maximum amount of damage possible would be useful. I suspect if like dreads are still heavily used in wormhole brawls, this might be used there, but I understand they're still salty about the what was that update that nuked all of the resistances
from wormholes with
surgical strike, right?
Oh, yeah, surgical strike. That sort of killed some of their stuff, but this might be useful for them. Also, you might look at dread bombs. It depends on the price of these mutaplasmids, how much it would increase the cost of your dreads, but if people are splurging on T2 guns for their dreads, they might also splurge on the rolled siege modules just to increase that little bit more damage and hopefully kill the super before the faxes arrive.
Well, the siege cycle is the thing that's people want to get out of that siege cycle, especially the dread ratters. They are very much optimized to try and kill an entire site in one siege cycle, and sometimes they find themselves waiting where they've killed everything in the site and they haven't finished their siege cycle yet. So they want to increase their ISK per hour, and so there's going to be a big emphasis on dread ratters wanting these modules to bring down their cycle times to give more control over that.
I wonder if there's any circumstance where you want to have like a little bit longer, like you want to have a 30 seconds longer just to be able to clear everything out.
I've seen situations where that'd be really helpful. Like if you're dropping dreads, if you're dropping dreads on faction warfare iHub.
Before we go too far on this, guy Gabe says in chat here that siege cycles are fixed; they won't be changed.
Well, that's kind of a huge miss on the dev team's part for making stuff interesting.
There's also a minimal amount of increase in the damage from siege modules that can be rolled. So, it's kind of been curtailed a little bit, so it doesn't become extreme, which is probably a really good thing.
Yeah, but the short of it is there's going to be mutations to modules for capitals, and that is a big deal. One step closer to CCP Rise's bluff last October in, E-Vegas, right? Where he said there'll be, what do you say, mutaplasmid titans or something?
Ship mutaplasmids, yeah.
Yeah, ship mutaplasmids. Yeah. So you're actually rolling the attributes of the ship rather than just the modules.
Right.
I think there was some screenshot they had where they had an avatar that was dragged into the mutaplasmid UI.
So just to clarify, I did pull up the unstable siege mutaplasmid, which would be it's like the highest risk reward one. The turret damage bonus is plus 2%, which isn't a huge one. Same with missile damage is up to 3%. Booster duration -10, and armor or booster repair amount up 20. Right, so the max you can do it. It's essentially just makes your reps a little bit better. It doesn't really affect the damage all that much.
I mean, that sounds like it's perfect for the Triglavian Dread, right?
Yeah, I mean, it did recently get buffed, so.
We could also look at the people farming wormhole sites in Dreads. They will almost certainly be rolling these to increase the risk.
Okay, so probably not fleetware, but you might see it in wormholes where things are a lot more specialized, and the biggest ships they can use are capitals. Okay, anything else on Depths of the Abyss that's coming? That's the patch this month.
They did add one more weather element in the sites themselves. So there are different clouds that have different effects. When you are in the Abyss, some increase your signature, some reduce the amount you can rep. They've added a new one which increases your speed, drastically increases your speed. So if you're trying to zoom around in them and you find yourself accidentally flying through one of these clouds, you can just careen off outside the boundary real quick if you're not paying attention, especially if you're in a dark environment, which increases your speed already. You can definitely go like 15K a second and just go right out the boundary.
Any experience with that?
I watched Torvald do it, but I haven't done it myself, thankfully.
Maybe in different circumstances, potentially.
Well, that's interesting.
Also,
sorry, that's a total of 1 second, Artemis. That's a total of 6 different weather patterns inside of abyssal space now, right? There used to be 5. Is that correct?
That
This
wasn't
is
a weather pattern. It was the pylon towers that have the AoE effect.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
they're like little sub-weathers inside the weather that you enter.
Artemis, sorry.
I was going to ask Baleful, with the new update, there are also new groups of rats showing up in the Abyss. We've got like Sansa's Nation and I think Angel Cartel, among
And
others.
they have
Is there
the Eden rats.
And the Edencom as well. Do we have a reason for this yet, or?
Well, the description of those rats say that they, it's probably to do with research on maybe trying to hit the Triglavians back, if I had to guess, or something like that. Because remember, the whole thing started with a Concord ship being heavily damaged after coming out of the Abyss for the first time. And Concord was all restrictive on people going into the Abyss, which is why they had the suspect timers in the level 4s and level 5 sites before. But the description of the rats say they attack anybody on site to try to remove evidence of them being there. So maybe they're doing something. They're definitely doing something that they don't want us to know about, right? And it goes back to the theme in Eve where everybody's the bad guy.
So even if you have positive Edencom standings, like the Edencom rats are still going to shoot you.
Well, yeah, no matter what your standings are, if you're positive for the Triglavians, they shoot you in the Abyss. If you're positive for Edencom, they're going to shoot you in the Abyss.
All right, cool. We'll look for that. Depths of the Abyss. That's coming in September. A lot of interesting stuff there. This week is GM week. That's September 14th through 19th. And look for one of the highlights there will be Whack a Bot in Uli. Uli is a system, and whacking a bot is CCP grabbing bots and throwing them into Uli so you can destroy them. And that's happening Monday the 14th. Any of you participated in that before?
I've never shown up before.
I have. They've moved like sometimes they get botting supers and throw them in there, so it's a good way to pad your kill board if you want to get them on there. I also like that this is like one of the most Eve themed community events ever. It starts with a public execution that everyone can attend. Very, very Eve.
It's very fitting for sure.
I'm waiting for all of the narratives to spin out about how all the bots that are showing up are from like PandaFam space, when like the ratting can't happen with bots in the current war-torn areas of the South. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. Well, is that we'll get into the politics later about that botting and all that kind of stuff. Like, where are these things going to come from? So we'll see. Okay. Anything else on GM Week that you guys? There's going to be some streamers that are going to help out.
There's a
Baleful-
couple events, like the worst ship fit competition, and there's a story competition. So
That's right.
that sounds like something that is going to be interesting, and I think I urge people to write for it. I love when people write about Eve.
Yeah. So good stuff there. We'll throw a link inside of chat here. Okay. There's a new thing here. Some changes that CCP has done, some key fixes to EdenCom Gunstar spawns.
All right, so Gunstars are the EdenCom equivalent of the Werepost. Everybody knows Steve of the Werepost and how much Steve has destroyed. EdenCom has their own kind of gate gun-like turret that they build called the Gunstar. It's different from the Werepost in that instead of ramping up like a Triglavian gun, it just starts at its normal damage and its fixed damage. Like it's artillery. It's basically artillery, right? With really good tracking. And so before this last week on the patch day, the orcas that build them were not working outside of a Mars space. They were sitting around brain dead and not building the Gunstars in the systems that EdenCom won. So now systems like Bay, like Castlemon, like Jark. Well, Jark was a Mars, so that already had Gunstars. But they're going to have Gunstars, and the associated roaming fleets, when people poke the Gunstars, are going to be camping the gates. And already we've seen a lot of increased destruction in these systems from Triglavian aligned players getting killed by the Gunstars and response fleets that we didn't see before. So, like, this makes the Silk Road that was created with the fall of Niarja difficult to travel because you really can't, if you have positive Triglavian standings, negative EdenCom standings, you're cut off in Bay and you're cut off in Sasta and Jark, so you can't get through that middle part.
Yeah. It's too bad that Silk Road concept didn't last very long. It was really, I love the idea of a long...
It's almost like the devs don't really have a good understanding of how logistics in the game works.
Well, right now,
Curious.
there's no Triglavian wins on the new Silk Road yet. So there's only EdenCom wins
We said
on the edges of the Republic.
We said the Silk Road didn't last. Like, what happened to it? Is that been completely cut off, or people bypassing it with jump freighters?
It's not completely cut off. There's the EdenCom fortresses in Jark and Sasta, and the EdenCom Minor Victory in Bay. So it's still traversable through the normal 40 jumps or whatever. If you don't, it's traversable, but if you have positive Triglavian standings, it's going to be a pain in those two specific areas.
Well, anyone who's running freight seriously should have no standings with anybody. They should be completely clean and neutral. And if you're completely clean and neutral, you do have some trouble going through Triglavian systems, but for the most part, you shouldn't be having any trouble with standings on any dedicated travel hauling character. If you're hauling important stuff on a character that has standings for different purposes in the game PvE, you're going to have trouble.
So that means if you're traveling the Silk Road, don't make any enemies on either side, and you'll be able to get through a little easier.
Well, if a Triglavian win pops up on the Silk Road, then that's going to be in trouble for everybody, because if you have no standings, like Dunk said, you get attacked by the Triglavians if you have no standings to them. And if you get any positive standings so the Triglavians stop attacking you, then EdenCom will attack you. So if the Triglavian win pops up on the Silk Road, everybody's going to have a bit of a more difficult time.
It's your responsibility to keep the Silk Road protected then, isn't it, Arsia?
Mine among other people, but
I'll put it all on you.
Yeah, but as everybody knows, both sides have won a lot of systems. Burnout happens and sides rise and fall. There's different strengths in different time zones. And I wouldn't be too surprised if there was we ended up with a Silk Road that would make a lot of people need two alts to get through.
Yeah. I'm with J42 over here. Says make Wrens great. That was.
Will Shop and Heck support your local freedom fighters? All right.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that. Also, in the news here is significant bug on quantum cores and ESI systems. Anyone want to handle that?
Well, basically, what we saw and probably others saw is if you install quantum cores into your structures and then you do the corp ESI pulls, it breaks that and you get a 500 error, which is in programming terms your SOL. So that needs to be fixed because there's so much data that's not revealed in-game to players, you have to pull it from the ESI. And so when you break the corporate ESI, you're breaking the ability for groups to get the information they need to know what their fuel is, know what's going on in their organization. So a pretty significant impact at the time that, I'm sure they wanted to see cores starting to get installed. Basically, everyone's going to be very hesitant to install them at this point.
So if you install the cores, then you can't get other non-core related data?
Exactly. Your ESI pulls are broken. So if you want to pull assets for your corp, it's broken. If you want to pull whatever, it's broken.
Well, luckily there's still a lot of time. For new structures, it's next month around the 12th, right? October 12th, I think. You have to have cores in there for new structures.
I think it's easy to say you have a lot of time if you don't have a lot of structures.
That's true. If you have a lot of structures, that's not a lot of time. But if you have a lot of structures that are on the ground already, you have until January, first week or second week of January, right?
Can we describe a lot? I'm sure the devs and a lot of our players at the very least will not really have an idea of what it means to have a lot of structures in terms of a null-sec empire. So from your background, Dunk, what does it mean to have a lot of structures?
When you start to get to the several hundred mark, you have to rely on software automation to tell you what's going on. You want to monitor the state of those structures. You want to especially monitor fuel levels in structures, fuel levels in the flex, the jump bridges and beacons. You want to understand the status if something's been reinforced, because right now you get a brief in-game note, that's it. And if you're offline, you don't really see it. So there's a lot of things going on. And when you get up to hundreds of which is not hard to do when you consider you might have Astra houses, Raitarus, other building and living in structures, even a couple of keep stars. Then you start adding in Athenors to mine and get all that stuff out. It's not that hard to get up into the hundreds of total structures, including jump bridges and beacons, and all of those count. And all of them have to be fueled and you need to monitor them. And the in-game tools, the structure browser you do have is limited in many ways and doesn't give you all the information that you need. So you kind of have to pull that data, and that's been CCP's stated direction is we're not going to put this in game. It's available in the ESI if you want it. But now with the ESI broken, if you install cores, we're kind of in this weird bind of, well, then we can't install cores even if we wanted to until this is resolved.
Right. They know about it, I suppose, and hopefully they fix it soon. Okay, I'm going to open up the subjects, though. There's a couple things here. One is Arsia came up, and also quantum cores. I just want to open up a little discussion for Dunk and us to basically talk about it now that we've had a little while to digest some of the changes that have happened there. Arsia, as you will remember, it was a key system linking Jita with Amar. Once that was taken over by Triglavians, its security fell to 0, which made it too dangerous to traverse. So you had to do what is considered the Silk Road, a long way around if you wanted to. And the other thing is quantum cores that came out this last patch. And that is a core that needs to be added to every structure. And it has a cost that is pretty high for each structure. So those are the two major things that I've seen you weigh in on that, Dunk. How do you feel about these things?
Well, the Arsia stuff is just Arsia stuff. It's players creating chaos, right? And so, I wouldn't travel through Arsia right now, even if you think you can get through in a blockade runner. There's so much debris on the gates, intentional and otherwise, that you're going to get decloaked. You might try and get through an insta-warping thing, but if someone has good ping and a blinged out stiletto, they can catch you. So I wouldn't try it myself. I'm paying other people to go around for the things, but I'm basically shifting most of my purchasing to Amar, where there's a lot of good deals because there's people are bringing stuff in from Null. They're going to Amar because they don't want to deal with Jita. And so I think you're seeing price differentials start to increase between Amar and Jita. And I think Jita's preeminence as the key trading system is changing right now.
So you think there's things are going to be cheaper in Amar since supply is higher down there?
They are cheaper in Amar.
Whoa, that's a big change. It used to be a lot more expensive than Jita.
A lot of people, myself included, thought Amar was going to die, but I guess it's possible that Jita's the one that suffers.
Well, if you're in the southern part of the null-sec map and you want to bring some of your materials into high-sec to sell where the markets are, right? And you say, do I want to take it to Amar, which is the biggest trading hub in the south that I can get to fairly easily with jump freighters? Or do I want to try and go around some extra headaches, a couple more jump freighter runs, or pay someone to go 40 jumps in high-sec? You say, I'll just take it to goddamn Amar, like time is money. And so I think that's what we're starting to see now. Whether it's long-term or not, I don't know. But this idea that everyone in null-sec is going to have to bring their stuff to Jita, I don't think we're seeing that play out.
Well, I think that's maybe not the intention because we don't know what CCP really wants. I think they're just experimenting a lot of times. But that's a good thing for players, isn't it? Because they can have more regional markets rather than one central city market.
Well, it's all about your point of view. I mean, if you want a one-stop shop because you need these 7 very specific modules that you want, and 3 of them are in Jita and 4 of them are in Amar, it sucks for you because you have to arrange both of those transports to happen. But if you want the chaos and the headache and all that, then this is probably okay. So it's really up to the player perspective. But we may be getting away from the time where you can just go to Jita, get every single thing you need for sure, because some people aren't going to want to bring things all the way to Jita anymore like they used to have to.
Well, the thing is, with change and chaos comes opportunity, right? And so there's now more opportunities for people to, potentially, create. I hate to use the word content, like create sort of a good things, like or a good situation for themselves and for others, rather than just being kind of priced out of the market or just pushed out of the market, that you would have in a place like Jita. So there is that. Like you're obviously going to go through sort of growing pains, with spinning up a more effective market in Jita. Sorry, not in Jita, in Amar. But it's. I imagine that kind of fluctuation is going to sort of peter out eventually. It's going to be better for more people.
There are some things that you just can't get in Amar, right? So there are a lot of like specialized things. We're talking like Tech 2 rigs, capital gear, stuff like that. It's people haven't, I guess, seized the opportunity yet for Amar.
I've bought mods from Amar before.
It also has
you
probably overpaid, but there's probably also like a little bit more ability to manipulate the market in Amar because the volumes are so much lower compared to Jita, at least right now. So there might be some weekend warriors that are profiteering really hard from this change, which is also like a pretty Eve thing to do as well.
Right.
And with the market changes, it makes it much more easy to corner a market because you won't get back into the ability to people to kind of drive the prices down quickly. So if someone corners the market, now with the market changes, they're much more able to just take advantage of that and not let any competitors and reap huge profits. So again, the change favors people who have a large amount of capital to corner a specific market in a region.
I heard your corpse is really cheap in Amar, says Styx there. Elise, that's to you.
I mean, it probably is. I've been dying a little bit.
You've been softening that market.
Just for reference, I just pulled it up right now. If you want to buy Munins, let's say you want to like fund your Munin fleet, in Amar there are 6 below 200 million ISK. In Jita there are about 45. So it's kind of a big shock. A lot of the people that I've been talking to, because I have an industry side hustle in the Amar low-sec. A lot of the people I've been talking to around the area have just said, we're going to play it by ear, but we're probably going to pull down all of our stuff and move over to Galente space, because in Galente space, they can hit Do-Dixie, they can hit Jita, and they aren't cut off from anything, and they don't really care. They can also hit, they can, well, there's nothing on the table that looks like they'll be completely cut off. Like those supply lines are pretty robust.
No yellow suns, or what do you mean there's nothing in the horizon?
There's no like choke point system that could fall to the Triglavians. Right, there's always a few little options for them to go around. So they've looked into this. They've said, okay, let me figure out how this Triglavian invasion mechanic works. Will I be completely cut off if I move to like Placid or something instead of Domain or Connet or anything like that? So a lot of these guys, even if they haven't moved yet, they're making plans to move. And because of the quantum cores, they're actually starting to drop citadels now before they have to put the quantum cores in. So Galente low-sec is kind of about to get a little bit of a push for some of these guys, and Galente high-sec as well. So if you're on the lookout for that, if you're one of the people that likes to shoot high-sec citadels, you might be able to make a mint doing that. Or if you're part of the Thieves Guild who steals these citadels, you might want to keep an eye in Amar high-sec, because you might be seeing some of these coming down.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah. So they've studied the map, and they said they can't really cut off Do-Dixie from sitting in between Jita and Amar, and also being a trade hub in itself. So interesting. There were some people making a push to make Do-Dixie viable again. It kind of got anemic for a while. So it's interesting to see that come back and thrive. All right. Dunk, anything else? Did you unload on quantum cores? How do you feel about this stuff? How do you really feel?
Well, I did a post about it, and I think I can TLDR it and just say, structure spam is an issue. I didn't believe it was a huge issue. It was talked about in my term on the CSM. I think CCP's solution, as I have said, is burning down the house to kill the spider. So I think they think they're making a huge impact that's going to create some long-term conflict, and I don't believe that's the case from what I understand of the way larger groups think about their structures. So we will see how it happens, but I just think it's a bit of overreach in trying to do something they think is going to have a big impact, which is what I consider weaponized inconvenience.
Okay, in Australia, I would burn down a house to kill a spider. Have you seen their spiders? They're like B-movie matinee huge monster. Yeah. But I get what you're saying. So it's too big a drastic change. It hurts too many other things just to solve a small problem. But I don't know if it's structure spam is one of their stated reasons. I don't think they mean there's too many structures necessarily. I think what they're talking about is people putting down a ton of structures that don't really cost them that much to create such a pain for people they put it down on top of.
Well, I think there's ways to address that, but that doesn't explain the, many trillions they're attempting to suck out of the economy to basically retroactively tax all the structures that do exist. So again, it doesn't seem to me like we're getting the full story here. When I look at it, it seems to me it's an attempt to pull a bunch of money out of the economy in this quest to somehow pull money out of the economy, which no one can adequately explain how that benefits the average person who logs in and plays EVE. But I think that's really what this is about. The structure spam could have been solved many other ways, but they've chosen this. So we'll see how it plays out.
Right. Another reason they said they put these cores in, and it's interesting, a retroactive tax is an interesting way to put it, because that makes sense, is that anybody who puts down a structure, if you're going to engage in that gameplay, you have to put an ante up. I think they even said that. So you're saying, I'm going to put something at risk here that you can take from me because it's 100% loot drop. And that is supposed to be something of a conflict driver. Well,
I think, as I wrote in my little piece, I think we're going to see a splash of explosions in the very beginning when these things become mandatory and you have to have them. But in the long term, it seems like it's a disincentive to put down structures unless you're aligned with the largest possible groups to defend them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my take as well. A lot of these like smaller medium groups are going to have to coalesce into a larger group, which I don't think is necessarily a good thing. I will say on the silver lining, mercenaries will have something to do, so that'll be good, I guess.
Yeah.
It is quite nice. I'm very much looking
It'd be
forward
kind
to
of
it.
cool if there was a booming mercenary business and that was a more viable strategy, like widespread as opposed to just one or two groups that does it.
Artemis, I saw that twinkle in your eye. What's that mean?
I mean, a booming mercenary business, it depends on your perspective. Like, we're never going to be the size of a large-scale block because a large-scale block doesn't need us. But your small industry group who has this to spare and not necessarily the manpower to use that ISK, well, we're available.
Yeah, I wasn't really thinking on the terms of a large-scale block, but I was thinking about in terms of like high-sec, low-sec, sometimes depending on what region you live in and exactly what area of space you live in. The biggest kid on the block may have 30 people, right, in fleet. It's obviously not something that's going to really affect the null groups that have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in fleets and such, but I could see it becoming a thing in high and low sec.
Yeah, I mean, part of the issue is going to be like anything in EVE. If it's more worth doing, like right now, mercenary business, it's fun. Like the people who enjoy mercenary work, who enjoy that lifestyle, who enjoy that being classified as a mercenary will still do it. But for the average EVE player, you'll make more money somewhere else. You'll get more glory somewhere else. What have
But it's
you?
not always just about
If
the
it
money.
becomes if it becomes a booming business, then it's going to go back to like you're better off being in a larger group of mercenaries than a smaller group of mercenaries. So even if it does become more viable, you're just going to coalesce into a couple of big groups rather than a bunch of small scattered ones, I suspect.
Yeah, but if the even if the mercenaries do that and the mercenary business is booming, that still allows the smaller industrial and otherwise groups to stay at a smaller size.
One of the important aspects of whether the merc business booms or not, especially when it comes to sort of low sec and high sec, is for those merc groups to get their name out there. Because the one thing which I think a lot of people would agree on is a lot of high sec players tend to have sort of blinkers on. They generally tend to not really realize that there are services available to them at a price.
Yeah, that's a good
Very
point.
true,
A lot of the time.
Artemis, is there a board or something that people can? How do they find mercenaries? Do you know?
There is a forum section, and I will try and pull it up for you.
That'd be
So there
grand.
is like a directory of active mercenary groups. I think there should be some kind of a tool to find, maybe even to contract. Interesting. Maybe a talking in stations tool to contract mercs for your needs. We'll work on that. All right. As Artemis is picking that, go ahead.
There is the Mercenary Services sub-forum underneath the Corporations and Alliances forum.
I just love that idea because it fits right into our wheelhouse of a station, a waypoint station that, people are crisscrossing in and there's a lot of secret dialogue going on. That's kind of like our theme. And that would be perfect. Like, yeah, I know. It's exactly the cantina, right? Where they pick up a frigate escape ship.
That sub-forum is on the web forums, right?
I mean, I think that a lot of people are going to want to do something that might not necessarily be like the number one way to make money or the number one way to rise to the top, number one way to rise to power. But maybe just like it is a role-playing game, and even if you're not as into role-playing like me, almost everybody in the game has some sort of image of how they see themselves. They might see themselves as a political power player in the null blocks. They might see themselves as a pirate or an anti-pirate. They might see themselves as an ace hotshot solo pilot. They might see themselves as an industrialist. And even if you're not role-playing in the traditional sense of I am creating a character and I'm playing as myself, everybody kind of has some idea of a role they're doing in the EVE universe, and they'll stick to that over even some more lucrative things sometimes.
Right. Okay, speaking of players and their behavior, we're going to move to player news.
Ooh.
All right. First on the list, probably the biggest thing that happened, the Horn of Gondor was sounded, and we make a big deal out of that because it's kind of funny. But what is that actually?
So for this distance, it was so the Goonswarm Alliance used their cache of everyone who had ever registered on their forums, sent them an email with a little update saying, hey, this is what we're facing. If you've missed EVE Online or if you left for other reasons, the game's in a great place right now. Everyone's coming to kill us. You can come on and be part of that. So they sent out essentially just an email blast to everyone and former users. The Horn of Gondor is always like a funny thing. I remember when it was used back in the day when VFK was being invaded, which is where they used to live. They had renamed the station to Matanigrad, and they went from like 200 people logging in to 1,200 people that stayed in system basically for 4 days straight. Right, so it can be a very effective tool.
Yeah, what year was that?
I don't. 2008-ish, maybe. Sounds about right.
That was like more than 10 years ago.
Yeah, quite some time ago, and obviously, I think the Matani had said that this is the first time they've done it. It's probably the first time they've done it on these forums. They've used the phrase before, but by sending the email blast, I don't know if they've ever done that one before.
Yeah, I think 6 years or 4 years ago in the original, when they were in Deckline and they were being invaded the first time, they also sent word out to their forums and stuff like that. But I don't think they called it the Horn. So anyway, Dunk, you're about to say something.
Well, I know there was a tremendous amount of grar on the REVE subreddit, but I don't get why people are so upset. It makes sense to me. If I was in the Matani's place and I was about to get my head kicked in by the whole universe, I'd be ringing every fucking bell, horn, tooting. I'd be making every sound to get every ally I could. So I can't for the life of me understand why everyone is so clutching their pearls that the goons are calling in their banners. Like, I would be doing exactly the same thing. So
is anyone upset? I haven't heard anybody upset about it.
How dare you email me? I hate goons. Now you have put up, and there's just a bunch of like politics and grar. But on this case, it's just, I don't understand how people are using this some kind of rallying cry that the goons are evil, terrible people for trying to rally their troops. So
yeah, like hands up if you've ever bat phoned.
Exactly. I know I have.
That's terrible. But I've only seen a couple of people post on Reddit, to say F off to Imperium, but I haven't heard large scale complaining that they're doing it. I think what I've heard is that it's before we get into it, let's say how effective it was. So the Horn was blown. That's an email list that was sent out to former players saying, get back in here and help us, and if you can't come back, give us some money or give us some resources to help us win this war. We're essentially being attacked by the rest of the game. It is their hour of need, in quotes here. And so what we've heard is that many players have returned for large fleet ops and are slowly adjusting. And Minna, who was one of their financiers a long time ago, part of the Goonswarm Cabal, donated like $1 trillion in ISK, and then about an additional 2 trillion in supplies as well. So there was some wealth that came from that, at least very publicly. I mean, we don't know what their numbers look like, though.
I mean, that amount of ISK alone is enough to basically cover like every single quantum core that the Imperium needs for their structures.
Yeah. Well, yes. Actually, I originally thought it was like 1.6 trillion, which would have covered
close to like, I think it's like close to 2.7, something around there.
Yeah.
I think it's more thulium than they can use in the next 6 years as well. Like, it's just tons of thulium.
I have to sell it. Well, that thulium market's going to sag pretty hard when it hits the market for money. Yeah, I would unload thulium now.
It is like an interesting thing that they do as well, because I don't know. I am probably guilty of overanalyzing things when it comes to public statements that the Imperium makes, because I know the Matani quite well and I know how his brain works. This isn't like a desperation type thing. This is a bell you can ring once. And if you start losing after you ring this bell, you lose like tremendous amounts of momentum, right? So he has to be very confident at the position that the Imperium are in right now to just ring this bell for fun, right? Because I don't think that this was like, oh shit, we really need this, otherwise we're going to die. It's, we're in a good spot. Let's get all the boys in so they can like relish this moment, right?
Enjoy it too, right?
Yes, because this is before a delve even gets touched, right? We're talking about a campaign to start going into Quirius. We're not talking about a campaign to go into like delve proper yet. So for him to ring this bell at this point, the way I would look at it is like he's just full of hubris, right? Maybe hubris is the bad word, but he's full of confidence right now in his side and what they're able to put together, that he doesn't think it's like a desperate thing.
But you do need some lead time, right? You got to call people. They got to get in. They got to get acclimated to this new game. So they can't just come in and be ready to go. They've got to get their supplies in order too. But more than anything, they need to be taught like what the normal behaviors are, now, as opposed to 5 years ago when they left, or 10 years ago when they left, depending on when they come back.
There's there's been a few people who have, joined, and the game is sort of from mechanics sort of standpoint, it's like almost completely different. So they do need to need time to acclimate. They need time to sort of learn the new aspects of the game and how their ships function and all that kind of stuff.
Right. Matani did something interesting too, and this is the part of the Imperium that I really appreciate and understand. And he basically told everyone, do not call people spies when they come back. Because it's so funny, and this used to happen to me in NC all the time. Although I would say also Vince is good at crushing trolley behavior. A lot of stuff he lets ride because he's not going to work on everything. But one thing that really bothered me all the time was if you jump into if there's anything about you that's suspicious at all, like you've been gone a while, people start calling you spy, and they're joking. But that's not a harmless joke, because that's like calling somebody a thief. And if you have any sense of honor, you don't want to be called a thief, even in a joking manner. It's just not funny, and it's not polite. But people do it anyway because they, I don't even know why they do it. I think they just think it's a throwaway joke or something, but it's really not. It's actually very insulting to the point where people will leave if they're called spies.
It's kind of like an Eve meme thing that kind of just has pervaded for years and years. If you ask a question that in the wrong channel or something that people should know, they go, you're a spy, ha ha ha.
Well, there's moments of that kind of sort of, unknowing sort of ignorance in terms of saying things in the wrong channel, that may cause an OPSEC issue. That's understandable why people would be a little bit annoyed by that. But I think the most harmless version of that's kind of propagated, this whole sort of spy, etc., is, when someone joins fleet late and asks where the fleet is, right? And always, you're asking the location of where the fleet is. Obviously, you're a spy kind of thing.
Right. But, it's usually stuff that, but that's when, I think I take it personally. I actually think being called a spy is like being called a thief, and I don't like it at all. Never have. But show of hands in chat here, if you guys don't mind being called a spy, put a Y in there. If you do, put an X. And show of hands here for you guys. Do you guys care if you're called a spy or not?
No, I don't mind.
I don't care if it's SPAI.
Yeah.
Right? Because then, it's just a meme.
If it's why have I been locked out of services, etc., and getting PM saying, someone thinks you're a spy, then I have a lot more of an issue. If it's just someone sort of saying, spy in like fleet or something like that, I don't care.
I will say, when I'm on a spy account and someone calls me a spy, my hands do get a little sweaty. I'm like, how do they know? Is this the moment
you're an actual spy. The actual spy is the most comfortable with it. Artemis, what do you think?
Completely fine with me.
You don't care.
I mean, it's one of those Evisms, right? Like, everybody calls everybody a spy.
Like the
So-
situations I normally see it in are like not the actual spies. It's the like somebody said something dumb. Oh my god, spy! It's like spy. I'm the FC. Like
Yeah. Well,
It's
anyway,
probably
so
more. It's
yeah,
probably more likely that the person saying spy is probably the spy.
yeah, right. Catch this person.
so Elise is calling everybody a spy.
So anyway, so I think that was a pretty good rule. Matani's put in some good rules in the Imperium. That's one of them. Another one was during blackout, don't down talk playing EVE Online. You can down talk CCP, but don't down talk playing EVE Online. These are like somewhat defensive maneuvers to keep a lot of people like working together. So good move there. But yeah, the Horn of Gundor was called. Some people got salty about it. A few, I guess, on Reddit. Don't pay attention to them. And some people donated a ton of money, and other people have come back. So we'll see how that turns out. And Elise says it's being done with an enormous amount of confidence, not fear, to get other people in on this, their great victory, which is pending, I guess. So let's talk about that.
I think that it's not out of fear either. It doesn't seem like they're in that bad. It still seems like not a whole bunch has happened outside of Fountain. So
I don't know where you guys get this. Nothing has happened in the war.
Yeah, I disagree with that too.
Fountain was glassed. Quarius, our little band of brave, merry brothers, has been fucking around with that for the whole time. And, they are on their heels, right? And they are trying to use every morale trick in the book to try and get things revved up for their people. They want this fight to be tomorrow. They want the end to be tomorrow, win or lose. They don't want to go through this agony of waiting. And so they are saying everything, pulling every propaganda trick, trying to pull people in because they want to have this happen now, win or lose. And I don't think that's the way this war is going to go. So I just wonder if they can maintain this level of fervor for a few more months like this.
Is there moments in EVE history where an extremely slow burn like invasion has ever resulted in victory?
Yeah, we defeated Fraternity. We defeated Fraternity last year for 8 months after they attacked us for 6 months in the first Fraternity War. So in both of those cases, there were multi-month wars with clear victors in them at block level colliding together. So we have seen it before. It's not some subtle aside. Like, this is recent history of how wars have gone.
Okay, cool.
All right, well, we'll get into the politics of this. Let's talk about Fountain. Fountain is mostly recovered now as far as iHubs by the initiative, and there's a lot of singing and dancing about that from their side.
Well, I'd like to keep, where are the goalposts now? Because what we had heard was TCUs and Fountain didn't matter, and Quarius, TCUs, and iHubs didn't matter, and it was fine. We didn't want that anyways, but now it's a great strategic victory. So I'm not sure where the narrative is holding TCUs and iHubs in spaces you don't live good or bad, because that seems to be, which is either dismissed as not important or claimed as a huge victory. So I'm not sure which it is.
I don't know where the narrative comes from with the whole Fountain doesn't matter kind of thing. Because, like, I mean, if Fountain didn't matter, then we wouldn't. Then Initiative wouldn't have fought to sort of to keep Fountain for as long as they had, right? Like, I mean, Fountain isn't critical, but there's a big it's not it's not one or the other, right? Like it's a big scale between critical and it doesn't matter, right? Like it's not essential, but it's not like it means nothing to us, because if it didn't mean anything to us, then we wouldn't have done what we've done in the last 3 or 4 days.
Well, the leadership of the Imperium publicly went out and derided the people who were taking iHubs and TCUs in Quarius from my group, and said it was worthless and useless and it made no difference to it at all, right? That was a public statement from them at how this was of no importance. And the same thing basically happened in Fountain, in which we never intended to defend Fountain, right? And now the narrative has changed from the Imperium leadership, not the line members. The leadership is saying this is a great victory that we have Reintosis Fountain. So I think there's a disconnect between a clarity of, are these important or are these not? I like it because we get a bunch of good fights out of it, but let's call it what it is. This is a propaganda style moving of goalposts because they knew no one was going to live in Fountain after this.
But so you could say exactly the same thing for the invasion not happening, not like us progressing into Delve like right now or in the next month doesn't matter. We can do it in in January or February. Like that's kind of the equivalent sort of goalpost moving as well.
I don't know if that's a goalpost move, because I don't believe that anyone in the Allied coalition has ever said we intend to be in Delve at this specific time. I think everyone in the Allied coalition has said this is going to be a long war. So I don't think that anyone on the opponents of the Imperium have changed their point of view of this is going to be a long war. We're not going to hit Delve straight off in the beginning, and we're going to slowly kind of close in on you. That seems to have been stable unless I've missed something, whereas the Imperium positions seems to go back and forth. And that's why people feel like it's a little bit of goalpost moving, and right now maybe gaslighting going on.
I will say strategically, real quick, if you just let Fountain have infrastructure to get to Solve 3, we now have jump bridges that can take you right onto the cusp of Y-2. Strategically, that's super bad for you, right? You're saying that someone can go into a different front with like 4 or 5 jumps. So getting rid of that, just taking that back, I think that's strategically relevant. Holding a celebration, we took Fountain back party, I think is super hypocritical, right? I'll say to that, like being able to say, "Oh, we got the Solve back," that's hypocritical. Being able to say,
back.
We burned down the infrastructure so you can't use it against us. I think that's a different piece altogether, and I think that's a valid one. But that is valid. I think Dunk's absolutely right. They kind of framed this Fountain thing a little bit strangely, which is a bit of a miscue. I think Fountain's going to be a bit of a black eye for the Imperium for a little bit.
Villy in chat here says jump bridges are only relevant if they live in Fountain. But if they don't live there and you can't cross from YTAC 2 into Delve, why is that important?
I mean, you're talking about I could take 2 bridges from where, for PanFam at least, I can take 2 bridges to get to Hopib, 2 Titan bridges, and then a gate, and then 3 other bridges which don't give me fatigue, and I'm at Y-2, right? So you're talking about 10 jumps or so, and I'm at Y-2 from where we are right now. I think that's pretty troublesome if you're in the Imperium, or at least having that idea. Just last night, right? So the Imperium decided they want to take out the former staging system of ITAC-C. It would have been hard for us to get there to save it, but we found a wormhole that went three jumps away. So in 4 jumps, we were able to get to ITAC-C, and we saved the whole thing, right? For people that might be latecomer movers or anything like that, or people that might still have assets stuck there, small assets, we're giving them a little bit more time to move out. The ability to do that every single time without having to rely on the luck of a wormhole is pretty huge, at least in my opinion, right? We're not talking about just moving caps back and forth to Y-2 and stuff.
Oh, for sure. Like if it's just a case of like you're just filing off a name on a on a TCU, like there's not too much kind of utility with having solve or not having solve kind of thing. But the if you have the structures in there that allow the that particular area to be very useful to you, then obviously that becomes that's way more important than just a name on a TCU.
What is the time it takes for the sovereignty to reach the strategic index you need to get jump bridge network up and running? How long does that take?
You need Solve 3, which is what, a month? Close to a month?
I think it's a month.
So it is still going to be a month until Fountain gets jump bridges back.
Fountain's not going to get jump bridges back, right? And the moment it gets close, they're just going to get melted again too, because no one's living there. The ADMs are going to be shit.
Yeah, it's actually 35 days or 6 weeks. So it's a bit more than a month. Now,
But on the positive side about the war, I have to say it has been a ton of fun to be out in a spaceship and blowing people up. I mean, I hope everybody on every side is having a blast getting out and playing this game and slamming fleets together, and you win some, you lose some. But for me, this is what a lot of the fun of the game is, there's fleets every day going at each other, not small things. It's a lot of fun, and I hope everyone is enjoying that for what it is, because there's times.
Well, yeah, it's fun until it's not fun. It's fun until it makes you angry. I get it. It's a game, you want to play it, and this is the big meat of the game and all that other stuff, dunk. But I always pull back and say,
I think I know a bit about getting my head kicked in with Elise standing, a couple windows away from here. So I understand the not fun part, but
put you
right
on opposite corners. Yeah.
Well, but right now, when I'm in local with our opponents, like everyone's laughing and joking, and then it's always strange to me. Everyone seems to be having a good time, and then I go to Reddit the next day, and it's all like "grar," the end of the world, or you're bad.
Does anybody on Reddit actually play the game? Like, it's mostly people who quit, I think.
It is, yeah.
I kind of get that impression
can't say
too.
That for sure, but it definitely feels like people who left the game for some reason or can't play it or something, and they're weighing in, trying to still be a part of the environment. But Reddit has no entry barrier at all. If you're going to write in the forums, you have to have an account. At least I guess an alpha account doesn't matter that much, but yeah. So anyway,
we like it or not, it affects the narrative. It affects player opinions and what they hear. It does affect the game. That people see things, they read things, and they may not be fully informed, and they may take away from it that like this is the new thing I need to be upset and mad about. And we've seen it repeatedly.
This is why people should move from Reddit to the IGS.
The EdenCom?
No, Intergalactic Summit. It's the roleplay part of the official forums.
I'm going to look for that.
That's what that's where I get my news.
Where you get your news? Yeah. Okay. So Fountain, the floodplain, because we've heard that a lot, has been taken over. It's been, I guess, burned to the ground and then now taken back over. Is there relevancy to that? Not sure. If you can't have bridges for 35 days, that's a pretty long time for this war, but it may go a lot longer than 35 days. If they can hold it, then it might be useful. I don't know. I don't see the play.
To Billy's point right now, nobody was using the bridges anyway. But I think it was like a lingering kind of threat. If I wanted to get into Delve proper, and I had those, I could go 6 jumps and get through into Delve that way, or I could go 7 jumps and get in through Sacked, or I could get in through C3N, or I could sneak in through Pureblind, right? So every entrance would have been open. At least now, I don't really have that option, right? So going through Y-2 is not going to work.
I'd just like to point out that, like, if you don't have Sovereign there, then you're not like adding to the amount of time. Like you're not dropping that timer until you have the ability to put down, jump bridges and stuff. So if you don't have the solve, then, you don't have that ability to have jump bridges in there sooner. So the thought process there is essentially, if you have a bunch of jump clones and stuff that's in Hoppip, and you wish to potentially use that as a location to get into Northern Delve at some point, it's still going to be a fairly lengthy sort of route to go from there without any jump bridges through to Whitetech 2.
Yeah, and I think that's why we're not in Hoppip anymore, and that's why the stagings are moving.
So there were 2 goalposts that were put up while Happy forces were invading Fountain. One of them was, this is a lot of destruction, we're killing stuff, we're glassing Fountain, akin to the whole glassing tribute, as it were, back when that occurred. The other one was, if they do push into Delve, no matter which way they push in through, they want to kill, like, everything. They don't want to let the Imperium escape. Was it Villy who had his whole spiel about we're going to kill them for good this time, yada, yada, yada. And so if there's an exit through Fountain that is relatively safe, then that is a problem for Pappy in accomplishing their overall goal. That was another thing that was put up as far as why they wanted to have Fountain owned and glass and what have you. Now, if the Imperium retakes Fountain and puts their saw back up, whether or not the jump bridges are there, does that impact this narrative of if there's an outlet through Fountain, Goons survive, the war is meaningless, etc., etc.?
Well, it depends on structures. It depends on structures. I mean, I've had to escape Fountain with no structures and had to go to blind sinos. I don't know how many people would want to escape Delve without having keep stars and fortizars to latch onto as they try and escape. So I think it would come down to, would they be able to maintain defensible structures on an escape route out of Delve, which is a question.
So I think it's going to be, are keep stars going to go back up in Fountain, and are they going to stay up?
Zero chance. There's going to be no keep stars in Fountain for like a year.
I would love to see a keep star in Fountain go up from the Imperium. That would be fantastic. After October 12th or whatever it is, please.
All right, tough talkers. Let's move on then to questions.
It's not tough talk. I just want content.
I hear from both sides.
In the game, and I could use some quantum cores. So.
Yeah, right.
I do want to double back before we move on. I do want to double back to one thing that Dunk kind of touched on, and that was having fun in EVE Online, which is kind of a big thing. It's really nice to see that people do have fun in EVE Online, but also part of the Horn of Gondor, there's two parts to it in the post that he sent out. I don't know if people read it or if it's public or not. Mm-hmm. I'll post it in our chat so people can read it. But the second part is the Matani kind of describing what EVE Online is like now. And he says, like, it starts at the beginning, but wait, does EVE Online, a bad game, kind of suck? And then he goes on to this little paragraph displaying like, hey, EVE is in a good place right now. People are having fun. You can log in and have fun too. Instead of demonizing the bad guys, which he also does, obviously, but instead of relying solely on demonizing the bad guys, he is kind of pushing this narrative that EVE is fun. You can come back to it for many other reasons, but the gameplay is actually good too. So we see this as like a kind of a new take from the Imperium, which is kind of like a more positive spin to the narratives, which is kind of interesting to look at on a macroscopic level, at least for me.
Yeah, but I know what you're saying. He's promoting the game saying, well, they tried this blackout thing and that was abysmal. That was terrible. They almost killed the game or whatever. And then he says, but it's great now. Even I'm playing it. Even I've come back. And on the surface, I think that looks like a nice point, right? He's saying he's vouching for the game being actually fun because he's involved in it and he has good taste. But it takes me back to 2011 where I feel like he's trying to keep the reputation of being too cool to like everything, but saying this is good. And I just it makes me so angry to think about that because you do so much damage in the process of saying, that CCP is incompetent. They don't know what this game's about, but hey, we're having a great time. Like we built something good. It's disparaging one to have the other. And I just reject it completely. But I get your point, Elise. And I think he did the same thing.
Again, I don't disagree with the Matani on that point. I think Elise
we all think the game is doing
it's fun. It's fun to play the game right now, right? And there have been times it hasn't been very fun to play. So
depends on what you play. Sometimes when you don't have fun, I'm having a great time because I'm selling things for
everybody's got a different Eve. Everybody plays a different Eve than everybody else.
Right. And so this assumes that there's one way to play EVE and it's this. And then when you say like everybody's having a great time, it's a big party, we're all just shooting each other. It's kind of like, I'm glad you're having a great time. But
I think people doing a wide variety of things, it doesn't have to just be PvP. I think people doing a wide variety of things in EVE is going well, right? People are mining, people are building things, people are transporting things, people are doing the Triglavian invasion stuff, they're doing the Abyssals. I mean, there's a lot going on in the game that if you go back 2 years ago, we weren't in this place. And I think while I have my concerns about some of the things CCP does, the game has improved for most people doing most play styles that don't involve PvP combat.
Right. You're right. A lot of things are happening, but I don't credit null-sec for doing that, right? I credit Arsia here and the invasions, and I credit Ashtarothi and the kind of work that he's done to build stuff up. Those are the guys I give credit for like having a lot of diversity of things going on, and they take a ton of shit for it. Bad word. Okay, so let's move on though to more war and more politics and more heated discussion as we talk about key areas in Quarius. There, ATAC BO4V and T8T TAC RA. Both of those systems are in the constellation of ATAC Z 7C9. Why are those important? Elise, do you know?
I was actually more looking at the keep star that's potentially going up in 1MF as a kind of a huge thing.
What? What's that? Tell us about that.
So there's a keep star that the invading forces, I don't know if we're not calling them PAPI anymore, but we've Allied Coalition has put up a keep star in 1MF and or rather has attempted to put up a keep star in 1MF. And it's important because that is in direct jump range of Titans from Delve proper. Not just Delve proper, but it goes directly to 1DH. It hits all the way over through Null and that area over there. So kind of hugely important. This is the chance where the capital fleets might merge or might clash. It gives that opportunity there. It means that if you're in 1MF and staging from there, you can bridge directly onto 1DH as people start forming.
Is it one TAC MF or 1M TAC F or 1M4 TAC F?
Oh, I'm sorry, 1M4.
Curious. So 1M4 TAC F, like I literally just put it on the map. Like it is bridgeable only to Z3V, KFI, and UHK with supers.
I didn't know that was down there.
I mean, you can bridge to you can bridge to the gate to 1DH, but not to 1DH itself.
So, Elise, what's going on here? What's the latest then on the Aquarius theater of this war?
So it's kind of early days for at least the PanFam side of the group that have moved over from Hotbib. As Dunk was saying, the Brave guys have been down here wreaking a whole bunch of havoc, taking some space. I think Quarius was the first system to drop to that one guy in a Velator, the one Brave guy in a Velator, who took the first system of the war.
That was such a good little narrative as well.
It's a good little story. So, I mean, it's going to be very much at least from the PanFam side, as we get situated, as more people start moving in, it's going to be kind of a slow burn to take more and more space. You're talking about systems that are, much more intermingled with Delve itself. In Fountain, there's that gap in Y-2 where you can't bridge supers over, or you can't bridge Titans over. You have to take that gate. So it kind of feels a little bit more segmented. Quarius, not the case at all. It is right in there. There are systems that are like physically in Delve that are in Quarius. Like they overlap with the space. It gets very, very close.
I mean, they're always lovingly referred to as fake Quarius because they're actually more Delve systems than Quarius, if anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh wow, this is.
So this is like we're talking about
big development. Actually, I didn't.
Big machinations from both sides. Big like groups that can actually collide now. When I was talking about how it was in bridge range, I misspoke. It's in cap jump range. Sub cap range, jump range, right? So not necessarily bridge range, but you can bridge into Delve itself, into NPC Delve, which is huge. Right, so you can go into a system where you can always dock as well. You can put down pauses as well, so you can bridge out.
So looking into Quarius, and the last time that we discussed it, this is while PandaFam was still focusing in Fountain. And the discussion focused mostly around the distinction between sort of the southwestern side of Del or Quarius, and then everything else. And the reason was, as McLeod mentioned, part of it is we consider this part of Quarius an extension of Delve rather than a part of Quarius itself. It's more valuable to the Imperium because of those jump ranges. And one stat that we picked out was what is the number of systems which Goonswarn owned, Goonswarn Federation themselves, how many of those have they lost? Because we found that as the war was kicking off, some systems that were owned by the Initiative or owned by Imperium allies were dropped, and then Goonswarn picked them up. And since then, they hadn't died. And so I quickly re-rolled our stats here, and so far we've seen 160 timers total have occurred of Goonswarm, Sov, and Quirius, and they've only lost 29 of those timers. That's 18% of the timers of Goonswarm-owned sovereignty structures, TCUs plus iHubs, have died, and a couple of those, looks like 4 of them, have been like flip-flopped back and forth, so that's the Imperium retaking them. So it is still the case that overwhelmingly systems which the Imperium cares about, which they stuck under the Goonswarm Sov banner, they are continuing to hold relatively strong compared to like the insane 50 to 60% loss percentage they have on other timers.
Yep, and this is important to point out as a stark contrast between that of Fountain. The Imperium, like as a coalition together, didn't really care too much about Fountain after D4K was breached. They did come up to some keep star timers, but they didn't really fight too hard over the timers in Fountain, right? So these timers are much more important to them. We see them putting more fleets out to kind of protect them. But at the same time, this is like the last week or so has seen increased activity because there are more bodies on the ground to start contesting these timers. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out in the next 2 weeks or so, if it's going to continue to be a stalemate, or if it will be a stalemate. It's not really a stalemate now, but if it will be a stalemate, if things will stall out, or if there will be heavy advances from the Allied forces into Quirius.
Well, I think it'll be very interesting if we get to a place where both groups have their dread fleets within direct range of each other that don't require midpoints. And so a lot of the kind of eastern side Aquarius not being hit because it's a far reach in subcaps to get all the way over there. But if there's dreadnought, projection from both sides, we could see some really big battles happening with escalations in which subcaps smash into each other. One side decides to escalate, and then suddenly we get 300-400 dreads on each side clamming into each other, and invariably someone will YOLO their Titan or their Super in as well. So that we're setting up the stage for some serious cap battles if the Allied coalition can get a foothold for staging capitals inside Quirius proper.
Yeah, but that's going to be a big thing, right? Because right now we're talking about a keep star potentially going down in 1M4. I think Goons are going to pull out all the stops or the Imperium rather, going to pull out all the stops to make sure that can't happen. Right? That's a hugely bad thing if you've got a keep star that is in range of Delve. It's NPC Delve, but who cares? Your caps can hit all over the place, and when that happens, as a pilot or as just any line member in any of these groups, mistakes get amplified in a huge way. Yesterday we were flying around and we heard that Horde had tackled a Titan. And we were like, what? You tackled a Goon Titan? It was tackled for like 3 seconds because it had Doomsday and then warped to the Citadel. There was one guy keeping it scrammed and it instantly died because the Fortizar was manned. But if that happens when you have a significant Dread fleet or a significant Cap fleet in 1M4 or in Quirius, and you can capitalize on those mistakes, then maybe that ship being tackled for 4 seconds turns into 40 seconds, and then can get reinforcements in, and that thing can die. So anyone making a mistake, it's going to be amplified in a huge way. And let's not forget, some of the biggest fights in EVE Online do kick off because a player has made a mistake, or an FC has made a mistake, or they've kind of looked at things without having full information, which is what you want, right? For these big fights to happen. You don't want people to have the time to consider all outcomes, right? Just sit there like Doctor Strange going like, oh, there's 4 million outcomes. We win like 3.9 million of them. Let's go. Like that's what people dislike. They much more like it when like these things, we have no idea what we're jumping into. Let's go and just Leroy in.
Yeah.
That is always the best. Honestly, my favorite fights in EVE are not the ones where we overwhelmingly win. It's the ones where we barely win and like everybody on both sides dies.
I do really quickly want to look at some graphs that McLeod, if you can pull them up on the stream.
For sure, yeah.
Specifically, we're looking at the narrative that Quirius is now the hot point, and that's where the focus is going to be for one side or the other. And so the first one I pulled was the total number of timers generated in Quirius over time, as far as like who owned the structure when it was reinforced. And we can see that back I can't even see the dates on this thing. Back in late July, there was a massive amount of timers being put into Aquarius. But then if we also look at the second graph, which I know we can't show at the same time, it shows that most of those timers were quote-unquote spam timers. They never actually got captured. They were all successfully defended by the Imperium. But then slowly over time, you have consistent timers being generated in Aquarius, and slowly over time, Brave, as we have now come to know, picked up more and more territory in Aquarius. But then more recently, in the last, what would this be? In the last 2 weeks, or actually the first 2 weeks of September, we see a good number of timers being generated in Aquarius, but the percentage of those timers which are actually being won is near 100% day in and day out. So that shows us that yes, indeed, this is now the focus. Not only are timers being generated, even though it's not a bunch of them, the ones which are being generated are key and strategic and actually being won, which I think is an interesting point to note. It's no longer the case that we're just spamming a bunch of timers. It is they are attacking specific key strategic points that they want to win, and they are being won by the attackers.
Dunk, is that you guys?
Probably would be, yeah.
Brave is recruiting.
Brave and Voltron, right? You guys have a little sub-coalition going?
So, just to sort of bring back to the point of like, essentially moving chess pieces closer and closer and closer, right, to each other. Well, one of the things that I've experienced having lived in Delve, multiple times, both, pro and anti-goons as well, is that a lot of the situations that tends to occur when someone's trying to, interdict or basically cause situation, cause the local populace to basically dwindle and die, is the degree of capital projection that you can put inside of Delve, specifically NPC Delve, of course. One of the ways, or one of the predominant ways that groups like PL, groups like NC. Groups like Evoke, that kind of thing, would do that was essentially stage caps in NPC Delve, and like I find it strange that current Pappy forces haven't actually done that, because it's not like the changes to the jump ranges has made that impossible to do. I literally went and checked to see the jump range to KFIE, which has a good amount of range into Delve, and it's doable by going from even low-sec. So what I see is the idea of getting something closer and closer and closer to Delve in terms of like just capital projection, not super capital projection, just regular capital projection, I find as kind of a little strange to be able, in terms of having to put down a keep star in somewhere like where was that place?
Well, I think the point is, though, that the Allied coalition is not going to follow what the Imperium would like them to do, which is to walk into the wood chipper and immediately attack Delve, right? I mean, I know that is what the Imperium would like for this to be happening right now, when the fever pitch of enthusiasm is high. But the idea of basically trying to move all your assets, or move a significant amount of assets into NPC Delve while your supply lines and everything else behind you is very tenuous, doesn't make a lot of good sense. So I know that everyone in the Imperium wants to fire up the wood chipper and start feeding my Titan into it, but I don't know that that's going to happen until like the supply lines and everything around Delve is taken care of first.
So I will throw it this way, right? And this might be a bit of a crude way to describe it, but I think Villy wants to wrap his anaconda all the way around Delve and just put a stranglehold on it. Not like he doesn't want to crush them. He just wants to make sure that, hey, you guys are in Delve now. You're not making money. You're not going to Fountain. You're not taking wormholes to the north. You're not doing anything. You're sitting in Delve, and we're going to whittle you down. And the people that have joined the Imperium, that maybe not are not like a huge cultural fit, but they joined for the promise of riches. Maybe those guys will no longer be in that alliance anymore, no longer will be there anymore. They will go somewhere else. They'll go north and help Volta attack Fade. They'll go to the drone lands. They'll go to High-Sec to make their mint. They'll do something about that. So it's very much like no one's going to just pound into Delve and say, ha ha ha, we're taking your keep spreads down. It's going to be a slow grind. It's a stranglehold around the entire region. These guys had massive like coffers filled with ISK, just waiting for the moment of someone to invade them. What they don't necessarily have, or at least their weaker point, is to manage the morale, manage everyone in there, to say, hey, how can we keep you guys motivated? That's going to be the challenge. That's the weaker part. That's not their weakness. That's the weakest link in this very strong chain that they have. So that's like the way that they're planning to attack this. If you wanted to just go into Delve guns blazing, I know for a fact there are about 1,000 dreads sitting in Kaifi and PR TAC that people would just hop into and just start going to town. But that's just not the reality of the situation.
Right. And on the Imperium side of things, they have moved their headquarters, right? Their super fleet moved from 1DQ to, I think, DTAC-W, which puts them that's 2 systems north. But one thing that does do as well is it takes the protective umbrella away from everything south, doesn't it? So how does that change the landscape?
This is something Carneros mentioned on TIS years ago, even when they first were setting up in Delve. And that was when they were planning out Delve, they had 2 systems in mind. They couldn't decide which they wanted to go with. And it ended up being that they have one system for their staging if they're in ratting and ISK making mode. And that's 1DQ. It has the best coverage as far as you want to make sure you have the super umbrella everywhere. But then they have their strategically defensive system that they go to, which is DTAC-W, I guess, which is where they want to fall to if they have to defend their sovereignty and their structures and their key strategic systems in Delve, because it gives better ranges, or honestly, I don't know why it's better, but you literally, like 2 years ago, Carneros on TIS was like, yeah, this is the situation with these systems. If Delve is actually like in danger of getting conquered, this is where we're moving to. So just want to get that history out there.
Well, the jump range is different for NPC Delve, so you can get in there better. And it's what Elise was saying. You can capitalize on mistakes. If you have people invading you from NPC Delve, for instance, you would be better off in DTAC-W to be able to attack NPC Delve. But the opposite is true as well. 1DQ is out of range of a lot of NPC Delve. But at least you might know better, or Donk, if you have any idea. Is that a big move, moving up to DTAC-W?
Well, again, it's been a narrative on both sides, right? If from the Imperium, they're just getting ready for war, and it makes logistical sense to have them staged there. So I totally get that point of view. If you're on the Allied Coalition side, you're like, they're getting ready for the end. They're getting ready to evac, right? It's going to be spin either way you put it, right? That's just how these things go. So it's in some ways tactically smart, but it can also be read as getting ready to evac. So I don't think you should put too much into that of what's going on, because each side's going to see it wildly differently.
Okay.
And I will say that the people on both sides that are doing the coordinated military stuff, doing the logistics, these guys aren't scrubs. These people have invaded Delve before, and they've been invaded in Delve before. Like they've seen how this plays out. They know which way the dominoes will fall. Obviously, there are a few mechanics that have changed since Delve has been conquered before, but the overall like systems that you pick and the ranges that you choose, these are like these are knowns. These aren't unknowns. These people aren't going to make a silly mistake by just moving over 1 or 2 systems. All this has been like meticulously planned.
All right. Interesting. So I think the crux of it, just to wrap up this section, and we'll do a little bit more on player news before we move into logistics, is that there is activity in Aquarius. As Artimus was pointing out, the timers are real timers now. It's not just troll timers or whatever. Fountain is being repopulated by initiative, although I think it's playing a less important role now than it did before. And even before, it wasn't that big a role. But now, really, the heavies are in Quarius. That's where we should be looking for the future of this conflict. And I think Elise just coined a term, Vili's anaconda wrapped around Delve. It's quite vivid.
Please don't give that one. Please don't give me credit for that. No.
I saw you think of it because you started laughing to yourself. I saw that moment on screen. I was like, what's he laughing?
I was thinking, I put it into a song as well, like Vili's anaconda don't want none. Like I just had that in my head, and I just.
I think that's what the baby got back or something.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, but that slow constriction of Delve space, how long is that going to take? And if anyone can really do that, it's Vili, because he fought that 8-month war against a now ally fraternity or Winter Coalition. So, and he has said that's the plan. It's not fast. It's not even on Imperium's clock. They can sound the horn of Gundor, get everybody pumped up, but it's not going to happen on that clock. So we'll see what happens. But look at Quarius. That's where the war is. And that Keepstar drop is significant in that it's the first striking distance base that is being put forward. Okay, a couple more things that are interesting outside of the war talk is Volta and Conifers going at it in Fade. That's pretty interesting. Anybody have any comments on that? If not, we'll move on.
So this is like the dream situation for Volta. I know a lot of people thought like, hey, Volta's golden years are behind them. They had Israd leave to join Goons. They had RTSQ leave, which is like a huge Russian contingent. They left Thera, so they're no longer striking all over the place. But I was talking to the Starfleet commander, and they kind of just sauntered up to Fade, and they're just having like 100 on 100 fights against the United Federation of Conifers who are living in that area. And they have hit them so hard that allegedly, and I haven't talked to anyone from United Federation of Conifers about this, but allegedly they're considering just like getting the hell out of Dodge. They're like, you know what? Wow. These Volta guys, I don't care anymore. Like, let's just leave. We've got better places to go. So they're very much capitalizing on the North being completely devoid of a lot of adept military people because they're all deployed south. And so Volta is having like a nice little resurgence, having some fun there. And honestly, it looked like from the battle reports that are linked, you can kind of see some of them on Reddit every once in a while. You can see some videos made by the Volta guys. It's like the good old days of EVE Online where you take in like 40 DPS ships and you lose like 2, but you also kill like everyone from the other side. So there's a huge disparaging, like just a huge difference in skill gap between these two guys in terms of PvP. So I don't know. It's a fun little area.
Yeah. Well, there's a video out on it that's really fun to watch. It's actually well made, but maybe we can find a link to that. I'll just try to find it. But yeah, Volta hit hard and fast. Conifers reeling and Fade being taken over. It's a small area, but it's still.
I mean, does it matter? Ultimately, I don't think people in the North really care all that much. If some of the bigger assets get hit, then someone's going to deploy back for a weekend or a time or something. But Volta are being very shrewd with what they attack. They're not going after like jump bridge infrastructure. They're not going after like hordes, Fortizars or anything like that. They're just focusing their attacks on people that they think the deployed guys won't really care too much about.
Yeah. All right. So the other thing is Pravi lost key Keepstar. It was being smuggled out. It's the 9UY 4 TAC H Keepstar. That was their old market hub. And it was taken down and being smuggled out. It actually got stolen. And the people who were stealing it were trying to get away with it. And they got blown up. So it died in the process. So rip. Next, Eve Uni gets attacked in Syndicate. That's where they have a null-sec campus. And CVA was part of the attack, I believe, which was interesting because it pit Snuff on the other side of CVA, and they're supposed to be in league with each other right now. So that was an interesting little drama. We'll see what happens there. Finally, on the Fleet Commander front, Alpha Star Pilot's taken some time away from the game. Enter Averin is back. He's a Horde pilot, also a streamer, very knowledgeable. It's good to see him back. And also stepping up, Urs Blank and Johnny, this is a good name, Trouser Snake. Actually, it's a terrible name now that I think about it. He is, they are stepping up.
Elise just like losing it.
They are stepping up. I think we have a theme going today. We'll have to think of a title that matches. All right. A little bit here off track, but we're going to talk about this because it's very important. We're watching the birth of Eve Echoes, and it's going very well. And then it hit some snafus. There was a huge fight of 600 players that just happened. That is big for a mobile game. So we'll keep an eye on how big those battles get. And then there was an autopilot scandal. Are you familiar with that, Elise? What happened there?
So yeah, if you're an Eve player, you might want to avoid the Echoes subreddit or Facebook group because they are vilifying all Eve players, or at least they did for a couple days. Essentially, there was a problem with the mechanics of the autopilot. I'll just go briefly into how it works in Echoes. In Echoes, if I set my autopilot and I hit start, it takes me right to the gate at 0. It doesn't take me at 15. And it lets me, I can even close the app and it'll alert me on my phone or my tablet when I arrive. It's kind of great, like if I'm going 40 jumps to do a mission, or if I want to like go anywhere, I can just close the app, not have to have it hog my battery. But there was a slight problem. If you activated the autopilot, it would make you immune from warp scramblers, no matter where you were, right? So if you're in a belt and someone comes to attack you, as they land on grid, you turn on your autopilot and you can warp to safety no matter how many scrams they had, right? So that was a huge, huge deal. For the people living in null-sec that try to patrol their borders, if they wanted to be invaded, someone could just set the destination to like where they want to go and they just automatically go there. And there's no way to stop them. There's no bubbles, there's no interdiction spheres, there's nothing like that. So kind of a problem. So NetEase went through this whole thing and they're like, okay, well, we noticed that this was a problem. You can now be tackled on autopilot. So we fixed that bug. And so now a lot of these people who are accustomed to not using this bug to avoid tackler, to invade enemies, just to get from point A to point B, they didn't know that they could die. So kind of thousands of people started dying just overnight while they were away from their tablets or closing their phones. They just hit autopilot, closed it, and waited for that alert to say they arrived in their destination. And instead, the alert is you're in a capsule in your home station. So that caused a big kerfluffle. And of course, this is still the Eve universe. So people figured out how to infotank the gate guns in low-sec with a frigate. Turns out the gate guns don't ever change targets. They also can't hit frigates at 140 kilometers. So you just orbit a can at 140 kilometers in a frigate. You shoot the gate, and then the gates go in. The gate guns always shoot you and only you. And anyone else that is on the gate can tackle anyone with impunity. You might say, oh, well, low-sec should be dangerous.
Can a frigate lock to 140?
No, so you just use that as bait, right? So the frigate stays there on an alt orbiting a can in the distance, and then anyone else on the gate, it'll never get shot by the gate guns because the gate guns are busy trying to shoot that one frigate.
Right, but the frigate has to shoot the gate first, right?
Yeah, there's infinite lock range in FOS.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's how that mechanic worked. And so basically the mission system, it's not quite missions, they're called encounters. They pretty much always send you to low-sec. And there's really no way out of it if you wanted to do those missions. So these people would be taking their very expensive ships into low-sec that they have done time and time again that's been safe because there's only cruisers and lower in the game. And they would die. And they would get ganked by these people on the gate. Generally by a Venture, just to add insult to injury. Also, the Venture's kind of bugged, so it has a 3000 scan res, so it can pretty much lock anything. So a lot of people had a very rude awakening, and they died, and that was the drama. They still haven't kind of figured out a solution to that yet. So that'll be an interesting development. People were quite mad because they perceived that the people doing these gate camps were EVE Online players that couldn't hack it in EVE Online and were instilling the grief into Echoes. So for a few days there, it was the Echo subreddit was blah, we hate you, EVE players, and so on and so forth. Which, if EVE players actually saw, they would probably play Echoes even more.
Yeah,
but,
right. They're drawn to that. It's like, oh, salt in the water. If you want more information on Eve Echoes, check out right now on YouTube. We have Who is a Fish doing her weekly Echoes program. So check out that and make that part of your schedule. We are going to go a little bit over, if we have some time here, to go on to the next section, which is war logistics, which is what we teased at the beginning of the show. So I want to run some questions past Dunk Dinkle and then wrap up the show. Here we go. How hard is it to supply a major alliance at war?
Well, first, everything I say is just going to be from my perspective. Every group does it differently, some wildly differently, some very similar. So if you're someone who does this for other groups and you find what I say is completely wrong from your point of view, you're right. I'm not living in your world. So I'm just going to tell you how I deal with it and what I've seen in it. So that's my disclaimer at the beginning of this. Is that fair?
All right. Fair enough.
So it's usually difficult in the beginning of a deployment or a war to get everything set up for what people need. And as time goes on, it gets easier and easier and easier. And there's kind of this cycle that occurs either with deployments or with wars, in which in the beginning there's a huge demand, everyone's upset, I can't fly my ship, where's my module, where's all these things? And then as the supply starts to come in and the industry and the importing folks start to get things online and the structures go into place, things get more plentifully available, and eventually they're oversupplied and the industry people are stuck with things that they're kind of, it's on the market and the price that other people are selling for is below your build cost. So it's this weird cycle that I have seen happen over and over again. So I assume other groups have seen the same kind of behaviors.
Yeah. Are you focused on logistics for Brave Newbies Alliance, or is it the whole coalition that you take care of?
No, I just worry about Brave stuff, right? And there's, loose kind of coordination amongst the Legacy Coalition for some things, and then there's some at the wider PAPI level coordination, but it's just kind of lighter at each level that goes up. So I just deal with Brave stuff. If somebody needs a hand in another group that we're friendly with, we're more than happy to help them out. But most groups are taking the responsibilities on themselves.
Yeah. What about Voltron? Do you help them out, the littler alliances in Legacy?
Well, Voltron is just basically the Legacy Coalition without test involved. So it's not like a mini coalition. It's just a code name we gave for coordinating those groups who tend to live in different areas than where Test is living. Test tends to live in areas all by themselves, and the rest of us are kind of all mixed together. So if somebody needs an iHub or a TCU or a jump bridge, or they need something fueled, like, we can reach out to each other and get stuff done, but it doesn't happen super often.
So what's the one thing that you are building more than anything these days?
I'm personally building all kinds of things. Sometimes we'll have plenty of actual ship hulls in a place, but we may be out of damage controls or multi-spectrum shield hardeners, or whatever they're calling invulnerability shield things.
Invuls.
Yeah, adaptive invul. Or, we may be out of a specific kind of ammo. And so right now we're kind of at the state where we're trying to react to holes in like doctrine fits. And then there's always a demand for capital parts. I build a lot of capital guns and all the modules that go into capitals, and people are really gearing up a lot of capitals for the upcoming fights. So I build a lot of capitals, and then there's infrastructure stuff. Not as many structures themselves, but definitely TCUs, iHubs, things like that are getting built a lot right now.
Yeah. What's something that might surprise people that you have to build that we wouldn't expect?
I don't know if it surprises people. There's an awful lot of fuel blocks that goes into everything. All the structures have an awful lot of fuel blocks, and it requires a bunch of materials and time to make all those fuel blocks and then to haul around all those fuel blocks. And so fuel blocks and ozone are like a big part of what keeps the infrastructure of all the groups up and running. And so there's a tremendous amount of moving of those materials from place to place, fueling, keeping track of what is fueled, what's not fueled. All it takes is the FCs to run a few fleets through the same jump bridge back and forth, trying to chase down the enemy. And then suddenly the call goes out like, we're out of liquid ozone in such and such system, go fuel it up. And then it's not easy to move ozone because a while ago they bulked up the size of ozone. So it can be kind of painful sometimes to move that kind of stuff around.
Yeah. So where are you building? At home, or are you building in the theater of combat? Do you ship to trade hubs? But low-sec, or where's your headquarters for building, and how do you move things around?
Well, I'll just speak to what I personally do. And I build in our home system, which is in Ketch, which for now is in fairly easy jump range of our staging and FAT. And so for me, I build at home where I have all my materials and it's all rigged. I know exactly how everything works. I have all my blueprints there. But there are some people that do build things like hulls where they bring in compressed ore, or they bring in the wormhole materials and make the T3s. So some people are building closer to the front line, but I personally build in Ketch since that's where the front line is right now.
And so where do you source your minerals or materials that you use?
The vast majority is all from local sources. I buy from pretty much anyone who wants to sell me in Brave and in Legacy that's in our space. I'll buy the materials. There are a few things that don't drop in our space that have to be hauled in, certain types of salvage, stuff involving invention, data cores, decryptors, things like that. Sometimes we have to haul in. All of the stuff for T3s is wormhole gases that have to be brought in. So those have to be brought in. But again, it's not hard to bring these things in from the trade hubs. You have an alt there in one of the trade hubs that you like, or all the trade hubs, and you're just constantly acquiring what you need, building it up, and then when it's time to ship it in, you jump freight it in. So despite the talk of scarcity, I haven't seen it hard to build pretty much anything that's needed in the game. I don't build supers and capitals, but I build endless amounts of fighters and capital modules that use a lot of resources, and we haven't run into constrictions in the supply side of the materials needed.
So did you just call like subcapitals cattle modules? Did I hear that right?
No, I mean
they're cattle. Okay, never mind. I was going.
No, I think that was
capital modules, like the guns and the siege modules and the triage modules and the capital shield extenders and boosters and all of that stuff. They require a lot of just raw materials to build the T1 version, and then they require T2 materials and some PI to build the T2 versions of them. And so all of that is sourced from the vast majority for me locally. And so they're all built with non-JITA GMO parts.
I like cattle modules though. That sounds pretty good. Okay, so if
but the subcat modules are actually like a painful part, right? So when you invent, I don't know if Matterall's happy with industry talk.
I love industry talk.
If you do these modules, like we'll go through hundreds of afterburners or damage controls or whatever the module is. Well, when you invent one, you usually are inventing a 10-run blueprint copy. And so if you need hundreds of these things, you're having to make endless runs of invention. And then when you set up to build, you're building only 10 of these modules at a time. So it leads to people wanting to have many, many characters to run all these jobs all the time. And I find it much easier to build a full fit for a Titan than it is to build like a full fit for 30 caracals or feroxes or munins, because I have to run so many jobs to fit those out because you're limited on the T2 module building.
Are T2 BPOs still in the game? I don't know. I'm re-listening to
Empires
of Eve, and they're talking about. So are they still owned by like a coalition? Is that a source for any of the groups, or is it just?
Maybe for some groups. I've never had my hands on one. I don't know if Elise is still trying to sell that last one he had that he wanted to sell. But
if anyone wants to buy Lechise's blueprint,
we know a guy has a
buy his Lechise's blueprint. Everyone needs Lechise's in fleet.
It's actually just for building T2 ships. It's way more efficient for the reasons that Duncan mentioned. to rely on invention, right? If you want to have, let's say, 100 Munins, you build 9 a week from just one Tech 2 blueprint in a rigged little guy in EC. So it's way better to be able to build with like 10 slots concurrently. So you'd rather have just like a 9-run BPC that you can pump out. So you'd be like 80 in a week instead of 9.
Right. So giving advice now to people who are just kind of starting in your career path of being a logistics master, what kinds of things should they look out for?
Well, the biggest thing I warn against is like overcommitting or oversupplying to one specific thing, because you got to remember that there's multiple people building and importing the same kind of things you think you're going to get rich on. So if you think you're going to own the market for jackdaws, somebody is going to undercut you, and then your 30, 40 jackdaws that you invested your life savings into are sitting there unsold for week after week, and you're frustrated. So I think you just have to be careful to kind of spread out the investment that you're making as an industry and an importing person, so that you don't have your ISK stranded so much, which is something that happens and really frustrates people that are just starting out.
Well, awesome. All right. The last thing is, who pays for your building? Is it are you supplied by Brave, or do you put this out of pocket and then recover it with low costs to your guys? Who pays for it?
Brave is an anarcho-syndicalist capitalist group of demigods, and so we are very laissez-faire, and it's basically a capitalistic system. So individuals build however they want to build, either on spec or to put things on the market, and then things are bought. If the alliance needs whatever the alliance needs, the alliance pays the builder for agreed upon cost for what it is. So we find that's more effective than somehow trying to manage the alliance directly funding and having people build directly at the alliance's instructions. So other groups do it very differently than us, but in our case, that's the way we run, which is, probably pretty different than some other groups.
And startup costs, how much do you think it would cost to ramp up to a modest level, let's say? I mean, it's got to be relative, but say a modest level of half of what you do or something.
Well, I do a lot, so I wouldn't say half of what I do. So okay. I think you have to think about it in if you want to get into it, what I recommend to people is interceptors. They're a T2 frigate. They don't require a lot of materials to build, and the blueprints are fairly easily available. So for something like interceptors, they get blown up an awful lot. So the market turnover is very big on those. And so you can pick up the blueprints and you can pick up the T2 component materials fairly easily, and then just do the initial build yourself. And that will start generating you some income, and then you start to get used to what's involved with T2. And then as you expand what you want to do, you might say, I want to do some of these building of T2 components myself. That requires more blueprints you have to get. And then you may say, I want to get into reacting the materials, so I have the components to do the T2. That requires more formulas and starting to acquire the moon materials. And then you may say, okay, I want to make even more money. I want to start buying the raw ore. And then you have to have refining skills and ability. So it's all a scaling thing. But if you have $1 billion, which isn't unobtainable, you can probably get started without impacting your normal, like I can still undock and do things. Because you can build interceptors and some of the T2 modules for fairly inexpensively if you're in a region that you have T2 components available to you, and you'll make a good profit. So you don't need 50 billion to get started, but if you do want to kind of run a completely vertical, like from ore to finished T2 everything, you're going to need 50 to 100 billion in just raw resources.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Is that too much? Is that too much for the audience? I can't tell.
No, this is great. We're going to clip this and make it its own little sub show so that somebody can dial right into this stuff, because it's good information. I wish we could go longer, but you're busy and we have to run as well. We're at the 2-hour mark. We have one last question the audience wants to ask you, and it's, I don't know what it's referring to, but I think I know. Tranquility money. What about tranquility money? Does that come all the way? Does that trickle down into the whole Legacy Coalition, or does that stop at Test's pocket?
So there's going to be a lot of spin about this because it was on the Meta show yesterday where both Matani and Asher wanted me to go on the record about the TTT money. And so the TTT money, it depends on how you view it going to the alliance, right? So the TTT money for us, it doesn't come directly into our coffers, but we do get a bunch of things with the TTT money. Now, there'll be spin, and I'll be posted up in a Reddit about this, about what I say here, but it depends. If you think handing out free capitals to people in Legacy doesn't count as getting TTT money, well, then we're in a bad way, and Matani's right. If you think that getting a bunch of free capitals given to all your capital pilots for deployments is a good thing and an effective sharing of the TTT money, well, then there's nothing wrong with going on. So it really is going to depend on your perspective. We don't get direct cash, but we do get a lot of stuff like, basically every capital ship that's needed in like an emergency situation is just handed out freely with no attachments. So I'll let the debating of my answer begin on Reddit.
I think probably one of the main kind of issue, the main point with that is like, that's Meta Show and Brisk and Matani were trying to basically, contrast and compare was the fact of the matter that it wasn't really explained by Villy in any way, shape, or form. Maybe you could explain it. Like, is the way that you see value from TTT something that is auditable? Like, can you tell that there is that, like, everything's above board, or is it purely a trust thing?
No, we trust our allies. I mean, we don't have some audit thing. I know that Villy and Gobbins and Matani, it used to be Aerith, they share their spreadsheets at the TTT level, but that's not how we operate. The last big capital move we did, as spies in the Imperium can tell you, there were hundreds of dreads and carriers given out for free to any Legacy pilot that could fly one to our staging. So again, that will be debated is that us sharing in the TTT proceeds, or is that not sharing in the TTC proceeds? But to me, our pilots like it. They loved getting free dreads and capitals and all that kind of stuff. So it's a different approach than what the Imperium does. But the people I work with, they're not upset with it right now. Although people would like there to be some sort of rage about it, but that's not the general feeling of most people in Brave right now.
For those that don't know, the TTT is the Tranquility Trade Tower. It's located in Perimeter, right next to JITA, and it accumulates a lot of money through taxes from players buying things in the marketplace there. And that accounts for a pot of wealth that is divided between Test and, I think to a lesser degree, Horde and the Goonswarm. That's who cuts that pie up. But we're going to end right here. All I want to say is I know a lot of players and I've known them a long time. And Villy himself is one of the smartest, most generous players in this game operating right now. So it's kind of disingenuous to say that he's being greedy and to try to divide Test from their allies. Just seems like a narrative, because the way he has sustained power is by giving a lot of power away, a lot of wealth away. And that is most clearly, that is most clearly visible with the trading tower and the arrangement he made to make sure that it was secure. He didn't leave out any big players. He literally just pays people out. That was the first person to do that. So it's very interesting to be attacked on this sort of thing. So, McLeod, you get the last word on this, but we're gonna close up after this.
Okay. Because I mean, I'm not going to deny, right? I'm not going to deny that Villy isn't generous, because, I personally experienced the generosity of Villy and Test. Back when they were fighting PanFam up north. There were various different situations where, they were requiring dread pilots and dreads to just get into dreads and get into systems, in order to apply DPS. And, I was I was one of those pilots that, that got a dread for free from Test, basically, from Billy. So I can personally attest to the fact that, like, yes, he is very generous in Alliance assets that he gets. But, like, I mean, I can't remember whether TTT was a thing back then. Certainly obviously is now. But yeah, so I can definitely attest to that. Like, so, the fact that, like, Villy is a generous sort of person. Yeah, for sure. I don't know. I don't think there's.
We'll leave it there.
I think the narrative is there's something to that narrative that, like, may require a bit more sort of, like, reading into, but
Well, it's not. It's very clear. Divide and conquer.
Point everyone to. I did a video at the very beginning of this war about 8 weeks ago about PsyOps, in which I called out specifically the attempts at division and making your leaders look bad. And you're seeing all that play out in these kind of narratives right now. I think Elise has talked about those same things on this show before. So I'm seeing this TTT thing is just another attempt to kind of drive wedges between the Allied coalition. The people who are in the Allied coalition aren't really upset about it, but it's going to be a topic of conversation.
Elise, you get the last word on this. Analyze the narrative, if it's a narrative.
I mean, it's just low hanging fruit, right? For exactly what Dunk said. If you're in the Imperium and you guys are fighting all these people, if you can drive a wedge between people by saying, ha ha, your allies are keeping you in the cold and taking your money, and we're actually getting more of the money than you are, ha ha ha. Like, if you can drive a wedge that way, then go ahead and do it. If you can get people to stop like working together, that's a huge advantage for the Imperium. I think that's obviously what this is. It probably might be a little bit too obvious, but who cares? Like, it's fun. It's good locker room material for the Imperium as well, because they can say, "Ha, look at these guys." Even if these guys aren't reeling from it, like, Brave doesn't care. Obviously, Dunk just came on and said they don't care. But you can still use that as a bit of a rallying cry to kind of get your guys on the same page as you.
Yeah, the only thing that bothers me about it is that all the stuff that gets thrown into the sea ends up on our shore, and that's what. So we get hit with, like, ask this, ask that, and that sort of stuff. And so we just want to clear up. You're being manipulated if you don't know it. If you're a part of it, then have fun. But we're not always going to answer narratives on this show just to satisfy the audience, because we're not that kind of place. We're not that kind of place. Okay. I want to thank Dunk very much for generously giving us his time and his knowledge. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. There you go. Go Brave. And I want to thank our crew, Artimus, Elise, Arsia, and her ship. And of course, McLeod, our engineer extraordinaire. And thank you, the audience, for coming by. If you want to support Talking in Stations, you can go to patreon.com/Matterall and help us out. We would appreciate it. And the other thing is that we have a daily show now at midnight UTC every day during the week, so you can get your daily news as well. So right now, if you're interested in Eve Echoes, go to YouTube and see Who's a Fish talking about Eve Echoes. And if you stick with us, we'll go ahead and raid, I believe, either Ron, who generously gave us his raid earlier, or a boat, whichever one is available. Thanks very much. That's all we have time for this week on Talking in Stations. We will see you next week.
All right, I got